Good morning, everybody. You know, what is GCFI without having these kind of details that we have to handle? That's the reason we are this kind of family. It's great to be here in Colombia, in Cartagena. And it's always a pleasure for me as a chair of the program to welcome you all. But this year is a very special moment because we have been, several years ago, we lost one of the key members of GCFI, Leroy Creswell. And for that, this year we decided that we're gonna have what is called the Leroy Creswell Memorial Address. Today, we permanently would like to honor the legacy of Leroy as an educator, mentor, and a person who was completely passionate about the advocacy toward marine fisheries and the development of young professionals and mentorship. Leroy dedicated his life to promoting marine extension and aquaculture and the well-being of the coastal communities across the Caribbean and the Americas. A lot of people know his generosity toward young people and toward developing countries trying to bring new knowledge and trying to enhance fisheries in the region. Leroy, for almost 20 years, was the executive director of GCFI, was the chair of the editor of the proceedings and the memories of GCFI. And he's leaving a legacy for us that is not only a legacy of professionalism or generosity, but also a legacy of how we should be, how we should treat the new generations to come, and trying to be generous in what our knowledge we have for the young people and for future generations and then leaving us. So naming this keynote in memory of Leroy is more than a tribute. It's a commitment for us to continue carrying forward his spirit, his collaboration toward applying science, and the love for the sea and the love for the new generations and mentorship of professionals in the region. So for me, it's a great honor to have the opportunity to do that and in memory of Leroy Creswell. So with all that, it's my honor to introduce the keynote speaker for this year, Alison Clausen she's the Deputy Global Director and Coordinator of the UN Decade of the Oceans, Science for Sustainable and Development of the IOC UNESCO. It's a big privilege for us to be able to have partners like the UN Decade, IOCaribe, ProCaribe, and all those institutions. But I think Alison will provide a bigger vision of where we're going and where we should go to reach our goals for the future in the next 5 years. Alison, this is your podium, and please, thank you for being here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for the introduction. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. My first time in Cartagena. I got in quite late last night, so I haven't had a chance to see much of the city, but the very short drive that Lorna and I did to the venue this morning made me want to go and see more. So it's wonderful to be here. And it's such an honor to have been invited to give this keynote speech, particularly in memory of Leroy Creswell. It's an incredible honor to be able to say these words to you today, particularly I think because already in the opening remarks this morning, I've heard many things that align so well with the mission of IOC UNESCO and with the mission of the Ocean Decade. And I think over the next few days, there's going to be a lot of room for synergies, for discussions and growth together as we look together towards the next 5 years of the Ocean Decade and and even beyond. As Lorna said, IOC through the IO-Caribbean Secretariat is absolutely delighted to be sponsoring or co-sponsoring this event. And I thank GCFI and all the other partners, and of course, Lorna and Marco and the whole team for their work in making this possible. It's a very important event, as you'll see in the framework of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development as we look towards the next 5 years. So what I'd like to do with this keynote, and I am going to just, excuse me, I am going to set the timer so that we are, because those who know me know that I can talk about the Ocean Decade for hours, so we don't want to do that. We want to keep it in check. But I do want to be able to give you some insights on where the Ocean Decade is at the moment, from a global perspective, from a regional perspective, and then look at why it has the potential to be such an important framework for action within the region, building on all the other work that is going on in terms of governance, ocean knowledge, and coordination, and then really start to look towards the future and contribute to the objectives of this meeting, to foster dialogue and outline a shared vision for ocean positive action, which I think is a very good phrase and a motto that we should keep in mind throughout the week, and also look at the way that the Ocean Decade can further build on the work of partners in the region, including the work of the Regional Ocean Coordination Mechanism. So let's get started. Hopefully this will work as I change the slides. But before we look forward, we're actually going to look back a little bit. We're going to go back about a decade to 2015, 2016, when the ocean, but particularly the role of ocean science, ocean governance, some of the things that I think we almost take for granted now about the way that we use and apply ocean science really didn't exist at the time. This was in 2015, where the Sustainable Development Goals had just been adopted. There was quite a debate at the time of the development of those goals about how ocean would even appear in those goals. And it took a lot of work on behalf of the IOC and many, many other partners to actually have Sustainable Development Goal 14 related to life underwater included in the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. At the same time that this was happening, there were obviously other discussions going on, climate change, with the Paris Agreement, the discussion of targets, goals and aspirations under the Convention on Biological Diversity. The BBNJ negotiations were still ongoing at that time. And I think as SDG 14 was adopted and there was recognition that the ocean really deserved this place within the Sustainable Development Agenda, and as these other ocean governance frameworks were being debated, negotiated, there was a common realization driven by the IOC, but also on the part of many, many other UN partners, non-UN partners, within civil society, within governments, that if any of this was going to happen, if we were going to achieve any of the climate change, biodiversity aspirations, if BBNJ, the agreement on biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, was going to become a reality, we needed to get serious about ocean science and knowledge. And it comes back to what Lorna was saying in her earlier remarks just now. It was about making that link between the generation of ocean science and knowledge and the application of ocean science and knowledge, and really ensuring that we were asking the right questions, that we had the right stakeholders in the room, and that there were clear pathways for that knowledge to be used. And so this is really where the Ocean Decade was born. In 2016, it was taken to the United Nations General Assembly. It was proclaimed in 2017. It went through a preparatory phase, and then it really got underway in 2021. So what is the Ocean Decade? I mean, the vision of the decade is very simple, and I'm sure many of you have heard this and know about this. It's the science we need for the ocean we want. So it's really already from the outset trying to make the link between ensuring that we have the right science to be able to sustainably manage the ocean. But I think the mission statement that you can see here on the right-hand side is even more telling. And if we break it down into the different elements, it really talks about what the Ocean Decade is trying to do. First of all, transformative ocean science solutions, as you heard in the remarks this morning, and I'm sure we will hear in many of the presentations. Time is running out. We don't have the luxury of doing what we've always done. We need to be transformative about the way we are thinking about the design and application of ocean science. We need to have clear pathways and solutions for sustainable development, and we need to more fully recognize the role and the relationship between humanity and the ocean, and bring in disciplines, bring in partners, social sciences, political sciences, economic sciences into the debate and into the knowledge generation to fully be able to resolve the challenges facing our ocean. So this is the famous theory of change, or the Decade Action Framework, which basically tries to set out what we're doing as we try to move from the ocean we have through the ocean we want. It is very much an action-focused framework, which works around 10 Ocean Decade challenges, which I'll come to in the next slide, and that aims to meet these 7 aspirational outcomes that you can see on the far right-hand side. So essentially, the idea is that this is a global movement, and you saw on the previous slide, it is the largest ever coordinated global ocean science movement that brings together stakeholders across society in different types of activities and initiatives around 10 Ocean Decade challenges to meet the different outcomes. And if we look at these challenges, and I'll come back to this slide later on with a regional perspective, you will see many of them are highly relevant to this region. We have the first 5 Ocean Decade challenges, which are largely the thematic challenges around marine pollution, ecosystems and biodiversity, sustainably nourishing the global population, developing sustainable ocean-based economies, and unlocking ocean-based solutions to climate change. The next 3 challenges are around infrastructure. There is a fundamental critical infrastructure that is needed to collect the data and observations we need to underpin the generation of science and knowledge. And then there's also infrastructure such as early warning system, forecasting and prediction models that is an important tool that is based on ocean science to help really make the link to societal well-being. And then challenges 9 and 10 come back to, I guess, that last part of the mission statement that I mentioned, connecting people in our ocean, where the decade really tries to work across all regions, across all geographies, across all genders, across all generations. And again, great to see so many early career ocean professionals here and who will be presenting, because that has been a big focus of the work of the Ocean Decade, but assuring that all these groups have the skills, knowledge, and technology to fully be able to participate in co-design and co-delivery of relevant ocean science and knowledge. And then the final challenge is one of the, I would say, one of the largest and one of those that has the most pieces and different diverse partners working around it, which is restoring society's relationship with the ocean. So this encompasses ocean literacy, it encompasses the cultural values of the ocean, it encompasses Indigenous and local knowledge and how that is woven into other forms of science and knowledge. So within the Ocean Decade, at the global level, over the last 5 years, we have catalyzed 62 global programs, close to 600 projects, and these are being led by partners from 78 countries. So we're starting after 5 years to have a very, very solid base of momentum, of energy, of these programs and projects working across the 10 Ocean Decade challenges. And you can see in that bar graph that there's a lot of activity around ecosystems and biodiversity. There's an enormous amount of activity around Challenge 9, which is the capacity development, skills, accessibility to skills and technology transfer. And we do all of this with partners, of course. This is something, as Lorna mentioned, that is led by the IOC, but we have partners around the world, whether they be in coordination hubs, in national decade committees, in regional task forces, and I will come to the very important role that the task force in this region is playing to really help us coordinate and convene and ensure that there is collective identification of priorities, generation of ocean science, and application of that ocean science to relevant policy. So what is relevant? What are the priorities that the Ocean Decade is working on? Our current set of priorities were drawn out of the 2024 Ocean Decade Conference, which was held last year in Barcelona, which was the first in-person gathering of the Ocean Decade community, which was a 3-day conference to really look at each of the challenges in turn, identify where action was taking place, where there were still gaps, and where there were critical needs to accelerate work through the Ocean Decade in terms of science and knowledge. And all this culminated in the release of the Barcelona Statement, which is still our guiding framework for not only the science and knowledge priorities, but also almost the infrastructure, the framework that needs to go around that. And I'll come to some of these priorities. So from the Barcelona Statement, guiding some of the prioritization and the work that we are doing, marine pollution, this was always a focus of the Ocean Decade, but really looking across the land-sea interface. Marine and coastal ecosystems with a strong focus on deep sea ecosystems and the emerging threats, including climate and economic development that those deep sea ecosystems are facing. Equitable and resilient small-scale fisheries and aquaculture, sustainable aquatic food production, evidence-based sustainable ocean planning, which is emerging as an incredibly important tool to bring together different sectors that are not always talking to each other through an ocean lens. And linked to that, sustainable and climate resilient ocean-based economies that are taking into account ecosystem and societal co-benefits. Of course, climate mitigation remains a focus of the Ocean Decade, as well as research into the impacts of eventual marine carbon dioxide removal initiatives, decision support tools for resilience of coastal communities, more information and more knowledge on the financial instruments, policies, and models that can diversify and accelerate investment in ocean science, social science and ocean literacy research on the human-ocean connection to underpin the massive amounts of work that are being done in ocean literacy, and then the ocean health and human health connection. So these are the science and knowledge priorities, but these are only going to be met, and this is what was recognized in the discussions in Barcelona, if there is an enabling framework, if the elements around the science and knowledge are in place. And so that means that we need to have the approaches, the tools and the skills to increase inclusivity of all knowledge systems. We need capacity development. We need whole of society engagement, including with industry, which is a group that is starting to become involved in a deeper way in the Ocean Decade, but I would say has been probably the group that we've had less traction with over the first 5 years, but which are going to be essential to sustainable ocean economies. We need to continue working on the science policy society interface. How does the knowledge that is being generated be translated into forms that can be taken up easily by policy and end users? And then sustained and sustainable financing, investment and resourcing for ocean science initiatives. Both the ocean science in terms of the research, but again, some of this critical infrastructure in terms of observations infrastructure, data infrastructure, and the other pieces that are often hidden when we're thinking about ocean science, but which are essential to its completion. So what does this mean for the Gulf and Caribbean region? You all in this room know much better than me that this is a region that has numerous ocean-based opportunities, but also numerous and complex ocean-based challenges. Some of the opportunities are the potential social, economic value of a sustainably managed ocean, both looking at existing sectors as well as emerging sectors, the social and cultural values of the coasts and the ocean in the region, the potential for the region's ecosystems to act as nature-based solutions for climate resilience, the climate mitigation the climate mitigation solutions that also can be linked to the ocean, and then the emergence in several countries in the region of sustainable ocean planning, again, as a means of bringing sectors together for balanced decision-making and policy-making about the ocean. But the challenges are there. Obviously, sargassum, which I know we're going to hear a lot about over the next few days, and other invasive species, coral reef decline, climate change, whether it be warming, ocean acidification, deoxygenation, or the combination and interaction of those impacts, land-based and sea-based pollution, unsustainable fisheries, coastal development, and changing ocean hazards. The way that we can work to ensure that those challenges can be addressed and help to optimize and really maximize the opportunities for the region are through a whole of society engagement in knowledge-based solutions for sustainable ocean planning and management. And this is where the Ocean Decade can come in. I mentioned it was a framework that works across different groups in society. Yes, the scientific community were some of the early adopters of the decade, but we work with a significant number of partners from government, philanthropy, NGOs, and civil society, increasingly industry and impact investors. We have a lot of work with Indigenous and local knowledge holders, of course, working throughout the UN system with regional organizations, and as I mentioned, a very strong early career ocean professional network that is engaged throughout the different activities of the decade. And so the Ocean Decade, coming back to the importance for this region, if we're looking at the need for a whole of society approach to co-design, to co-delivery of ocean science and knowledge for solutions, the decade can provide this neutral connecting framework for diverse actors. It is built upon requirements for co-creation and uptake. It embeds mechanisms to translate global ambition to regional priorities, and I'll come again to that for the region in the next slide. And it is very solutions focused and action oriented, with all of the programs and projects being part of the decade needing to demonstrate how they are contributing to sustainable development. So in the region, there is a lot already going on that is forming the basis for the work under the Ocean Decade. And I would say that this region, I mentioned there was a preparation phase for the decade between 2018 and 2021. This region was one of the strongest and earliest communities engaged in the Ocean Decade, organizing, this was right at the time of COVID, organizing online webinars, working group, task groups, and developing some of the first regional projects that were endorsed as decade actions. You can see the distribution of endorsed decade actions that are either led by regional partners or working in this region. It is quite a significant number. We would like to see more. We would also like to increase leadership of decade actions, so having research institutes and partners within the region leading the decade actions. And to do that, we've put a number of things in place, including with the IO Caribbean office. So we now have a regional decade coordination office, which is working to coordinate action across decade actions, to identify gaps, to set priorities moving forward. This is actually based within the IO Caribbean office, and Marco Tosic, who is here, is the lead of that office. We also have a wonderful task force. The region, as it's called under the Ocean Decade, is the Tropical Americas and Caribbean, the TAC. We have a wonderful task force, a number of members I can see sitting in the audience, who will be meeting tomorrow, that provides strategic guidance to really try and increase the way that the Ocean Decade is meeting regional priorities. And then we have a number of national decade committees that are working to translate the global ambition to the national level. So all these pieces come together and have come together very, very successfully in the development of a roadmap for the implementation of the Ocean Decade in the tropical Americas and Caribbean region, which is one of the documents I think is really important for us all to keep in mind and think about as we are moving forward for the next 5 years. This roadmap is unique for the Ocean Decade. There are other regional roadmaps that exist, but this is the first one that was developed after the Barcelona statement was released at the conference. So it was able to really take on the emerging priorities from the decade that were identified in Barcelona by the global community and bring them to the regional context. And you can see the 8 priorities that were identified. So this is a roadmap that was developed with the TAC task force. It was then reviewed and went out for comment with other stakeholders and was actually launched last December at the CELAC conference here in Colombia in San Andres. And it sets out really what we envisage as the future for priorities, for the future decade actions, for the future decade collaborations, and for the future initiatives. It is a roadmap that very much recognizes the diversity of this region, recognizing that there are individual national imperatives and needs and challenges, but also recognizing there are common challenges and opportunities that can be better addressed in a regional approach. Very importantly, it recognizes the existing regional governance frameworks that exist, the existing regional coordination frameworks, the infrastructure platforms that exist, and aims to build on those rather than trying to start everything from scratch. So I do encourage you to download this document. Hopefully the QR code is working. If not, we can share it with you because it's an important reference document for discussions over the next few days. We already have, as you saw in the previous slide, a number of decade actions working in the region that fit within the priorities of this roadmap. And I know we'll be hearing from some of them on the panels. And then over the next few days, we'll also be starting work with the task force on a more operational implementation plan, resource mobilization plan to overcome what has been one of the greatest obstacles to full and effective implementation of this roadmap, which is, of course, resourcing in a very complex resource environment at the moment. The roadmap is going to be successful with the engagement of partners from across the region. The decade has just come through a midterm evaluation, which has really identified, I guess, a number of principles, if you like, that we need to keep in mind as we think about the implementation of the roadmap in the decade. And you can see some of these here. The focus on strengthened delivery mechanisms is really code for saying we need to be better at working together. We need to be better at working together within regions and across regions as we look at the next 5 years of the Ocean Decade. We are looking to put in place further structures, further support for greater coordination between national, regional, and global levels, but also getting the decade actions, the 62 global programs that are working throughout the decade on common themes and in common geographies, helping them and supporting them to work in a way that can create greater collective impact and also start looking to the legacy of the decade so that when we come to 2030, we don't just close up the shop and pat ourselves on the back and congratulate ourselves for 10 years of a lot of work, but that there is a sustained legacy arising from the decade and that there have been monumental shifts, new initiatives, and different ways of thinking and talking about ocean science and the way that it is generated, used, and financed. So to do this, we have another milestone conference coming up, and this is also something that we're going to be talking about throughout the week, which is the 2027 Ocean Decade Conference. This is going to be held in Rio de Janeiro from the 7th to 9th of April 2027. And just like this meeting here this week, it is intended to be much more than a conference. It is meant to be a milestone in the delivery of regional and global priorities for the Ocean Decade so that we can both start the sprint towards the end of the decade. By the time we get to this conference, we will be 3 years out from the end of the decade, but that we can also shape the post-2030 marathon. The conference will be a critical moment. It'll be the last time where we come together, where we still have a chance to make all our priorities a reality, because the conference after that will be in 2030 at the end of the decade. So it has these different objectives: agreeing on the urgent and immediate actions to the end of the decade to deliver priority needs for policy and decision-making, agreeing on the partnerships and actions to lay the foundation of the post-2030 legacy, and then to inform dialogue at the 2028 United Nations Ocean Conference, which we expect to be held in Korea in 2028, co-hosted by Chile and Korea, and also contribute to the post-2030 agenda dialogue on ocean issues. What will happen after SDG 14? What place for the ocean in the post-2030 agenda dialogue? And this conference is a way to link into those discussions. Just to shout out that there will be a workshop this week on the 29th, looking at the Rio workshop and trying to really get input in quite an informal way about how best to shape the agenda and make this conference the most important and the most useful that it can be for the region as well. For those of you who are in Barcelona, just to let you know, we will actually be repeating the experience of Barcelona. It'll be a full week within Rio, with opportunities for partner-led satellite events in various venues around core themes leading into the Ocean Decade Conference. And of course, we want a very strong regional voice, a regional presence, both in the special events in the lead up to the conference and in the conference itself. And as part of doing that, and this again is something that we will be discussing in the workshop later this week, we are putting in place a preparation process for the conference where we're trying to come at the question from the priority delivery areas, from the priority areas of impact that we would like the decade to deliver by 2027 and then beyond, and then working back from there to see how we can best convene different partners and actors at the regional level, at the global level, the existing programs, the existing projects, to be able to make commitments, identify collective actions, start forming partnerships that can be presented in Rio. So this is something that is going to take place over the course of next week, over the course of next year. We're looking at priority themes that align very well with the priority themes of the regional roadmap as well, around biodiversity, coastal resilience, sustainable ocean economy, and multiple ocean stresses, underpinned by cross-cutting themes of observations and data, financing and investment, and capacity development and ocean literacy. So to conclude, you can see we're in a position at the moment where there has been a significant amount of activity within the Ocean Decade at the global level. Within the region were some of the, and partners in the region were some of the first adopters, the first partners within the Ocean Decade, with some of the earliest projects that were endorsed. They have struggled for resources, they have struggled for financing, but with now the release of the regional roadmap and the tireless work of the task force and the connections into the other mechanisms and the other initiatives that are underway in the region, we believe we are poised for a unique moment for this region to really come together and have a very strong collective voice throughout the preparation process for the conference in Rio in 2027, but then also using the conference in Rio as a showcase, as an international showcase for the work of the region to set the future priorities of the region and to attract new partnerships and initiatives to contribute fully to the success of the Ocean Decade to 2030 and beyond. So I encourage you all to be a part of it. Please do join us this week as we start discussing this in more detail, but also think about different ways in which you may be able to get involved in the Ocean Decade. We were talking on the podium before about the strong alignment between the whole of society approach and mission of the Ocean Decade and of GCFI. And I really think there is a clear opportunity for there to be a stronger engagement and a stronger collaboration. And I look forward to working with, discussing with many of you throughout the week to identify tangible ways in which we can do that and contribute to the success of the Ocean Decade. So thank you very much for your attention. Sure, we're forgetting. Okay. Okay. I will welcome any questions. No, if there are any questions, I'd be very happy to answer them. Also very happy to start hearing your perspectives on how, if you've been involved in the Ocean Decade, how you've found it of relevance to the region, ways in which we can improve that. Of course, we'll continue all these discussions in the workshop, but very happy for any initial feedback or thoughts based on what I've just presented. And I think there are microphones going around the room. And Lorna is going to break the ice. Thank you. Somebody has to start, exactly.
Thank you very much, Alison, for a very comprehensive and very clear progression through the Ocean Decade and what has been done, especially in the region. Really appreciate that. But I noticed in your presentation that challenges 1, 6, and 8, was it? In terms of implementation seem lower than the others. And I was actually surprised given the emphasis in our region on some of those. So I'm just wondering if you have any reason, if there's any reasoning behind that, if you could perhaps tell us how we can increase profile, because it's possible that the work is being done and we just don't know. So speak to that, please. Thank you.
Excellent question. I think there are two things. So just a reminder, challenge 1 is marine pollution, challenge 6 is coastal resilience, and challenge 8 is ocean data. So all entirely relevant, not only to this meeting, but also to the regional roadmap and the work of this region. And I think within the region, there are two things. I think there is a lot going on in the region that is not yet formally linked to the Ocean Decade. I think that's really a missed opportunity, that we should look at ways to increase the recognition of initiatives that are underway in the region around these themes that are not yet formally endorsed as part of the decade. Endorsement as part of the decade brings projects into a global network. It creates new opportunities for partnerships, for initiatives, and helps to give a place to contribute to some of this collective action that I was talking about. So that's one issue there. I also think globally, there are some key, very large programs going on in some of these areas. There will soon be a new marine pollution program around coastal resilience. There's obviously Coast Predict. Around Challenge 8 and data, there's the digital twin of the ocean and other things. But some of these bigger programs have not yet generated the full momentum and activity at the national, the subnational, and the regional level. And I think that's a question potentially of awareness as well. We're recognizing that we have a process whereby we put out calls for decade actions. We are increasingly targeting communities through those calls for decade actions rather than just having open calls to really fill some of these gaps. And I think having the regional roadmap, having the task force, having the connections into other mechanisms, governance mechanisms and coordination mechanisms will help us in that work to target some of these communities with existing or new initiatives and bring them into the Ocean Decade. One here. I think there's a...
Go up. Yes.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Prescott Smith from the Bahamas. One of the challenges I find when we talk about protecting oceans in the region is, and this does not just apply to the Bahamas. I've done research throughout our entire region, and when we look at how our economies are structured, and oftentimes local communities don't really have a voice on what happens to their environment. the development models that are chosen, big companies come in, the destruction of the coastlines, filling in of creek systems, wetlands, all of these things impact the success of which you aim to achieve. And we need to have this uncomfortable conversation about how conservation is practiced. A lot of money flows into the Caribbean, but oftentimes the voices of local people are excluded from the process. We're heavily involved in a project in the Bahamas trying to restore nursery systems, but I am equally passionate about why aren't all of the block creeks in the Caribbean and our region throughout, whether it's all coastal areas, are not being restored, and really empowering local communities. The development model chosen, how do we empower these local communities with a sustainable model, looking at the resources that they have, rather than they being just left in a vulnerable state for the next big development project that comes in. All the time we're having these high-level conversations about conservation, the ecology, and the environment, while we see a decline of our fisheries, our ocean spaces at the end of the day. That is one of the most critical factors we need to have. And I will end with this. It cannot be this conversation like we sit in Germany and we discuss African matters, but there's no Africans to the table. It's the same thing what is happening in the conservation space in our region. Hundreds of millions of dollars are flowing into the Caribbean, using the resources of the region, and someone is coming in and dictating to us how conservation should take place, rather than really engaging, learning from local field scientists at the end of the day. And so we can have these high-level conversations, and you'll further see our oceans, marine resources declining, while we have these conversations about how do we fix it. And it cannot just be the fox in the hen house. We really have to engage local communities from the bottom up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that comment. I couldn't agree more fully. It's an extremely complex challenge, but one that we need to address. A few of the things that we're trying to do through the Ocean Decade that are starting to bear fruit, but it's at a relatively small scale, putting a focus on community-led projects, community-led knowledge generation and application, looking at citizen science initiatives that can be not only a way of generating data, but also a way of raising awareness, and also working with coastal cities. So working with mayors and municipalities, where often it's an easier route to engage local communities. So still obviously a lot of work to be done, but clear recognition of the challenge and something we are attempting to redress in different ways.
Thank you. Alison. Thank you. It's okay. Okay, Alison, congratulations for your presentation. I think it's a very good synthesis, and as always. Voy a hablar en español. No, estamos en Cartagena. Hello. So, Alison, I congratulate you for this special synthesis, and it's wonderful, as always. And being in this group since inception, I would like to make a comment. O sea, voy a hacer un comentario como miembro del grupo de tarea estratégico para el decenio de los océanos. Entonces, la presentación que hizo la señora Alison Clausen es una excelente síntesis de cómo empezamos desde que se concibió a cómo vamos ahora. Y hay un grupo estratégico que ha generado o ha apoyado estas iniciativas. Para responder un poco a la pregunta anterior, precisamente lo que no se busca es encontrar una solución que se haga en Alemania, en Inglaterra o en Francia y se traiga al Caribe. Lo que se busca es de que haya una respuesta a las necesidades del Caribe. Y en esa preparación hubo 6 talleres coordinados por la oficina de Biocaribe, donde está la doctora Lorna Innis. Se agrupó una serie de información y se presentó a este plan de trabajo o hoja de ruta que esperamos se lleve. Ahora, el diseño no trae recursos per se, pero lo que hace es ayudar para que estos recursos se den y para que haya una integración en todo lo que Alison mencionó, o sea, el codiseño, la complementación, la necesidad de entender los problemas de la región, pero especialmente, y en ese es una base, toda la parte de infraestructura, porque se necesitan las observaciones, se necesita el manejo apropiado de la observación, el manejo de la información y la creación de capacidades. So, Alison, I made just a summary
He's going to
of
do a
what
synthesis.
was
Yeah. Thank you.
the role of the task force, how we conceive is not to provide the solution from Germany, from England, or from Paris. That we have a lot of work and a capacity made in the region. And this is what is reflected in this roadmap, but what we expect is really to make now implementation. Gracias.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for synthesizing as well. And yeah, this was exactly the objective of having the task force in place. There's a similar task force in Africa, which drives the agenda, drives the discussion in Africa, and also having national decade committees, national decade focal points, hopefully soon a regional decade committee as well to work with the task force to bring the voice of governments into the discussions more strongly, so that it is, I mean, when we first spoke about the roadmap, there was, I think, the aim, the desire to have a framework so that partners from within the region, but also from partners from outside the region, but who wanted to work here, were working towards collective priorities. And so, yes, very much a regionally driven approach.
Good morning. Thank you so much for your presentation. I have two questions. First one is, what mechanisms would you suggest to move from these beautiful plans to action, to real action in the countries, in each territory? That is the first one. And the second one, and how or what kind of company or support can UNESCO give for researchers to move from science to policy and then real action, to really get into the decision-making processes? So with who we can speak in each country, so maybe we can go with UNESCO together and maybe convince more the politicians and the people that make decisions to make like real changes that we need. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great question. So I'll answer the second question first. I mean, they're somewhat related, but I think there are different mechanisms that exist within the decade. First of all, the national decade committees, which are groups of scientists and policymakers at the national level where they exist, who are working together, who are looking at how they can identify what the national level priority is and then move the science to the policy. So that's one way of doing it. At the global level, again, this is going to be a huge focus of the conference in Rio, because it is going to be we want the policy makers' needs to be the end point of the way we structure that conference, so that there is a very, very deliberate construction of a dialogue between policymakers and the scientific community through the Rio conference. Now, that doesn't happen by magic over 3 days. That happens through a process of a year-long preparatory process of bringing people together in policy expert workshops, bringing the scientific community together to identify gaps, and looking at how they can be filled. For the other piece around how do we move from the plans to the action, I would argue it's already happening. I mean, yes, we can always have more, but we have 62 programs, we have 600 projects, there are close to 10,000 individuals involved in these activities. I think we've been very good at generating the knowledge, but that's why your two questions are so pertinent. What we've been less successful at is getting that knowledge to where it wants to go. And if we have one thing that we need to concentrate on for the second half of the decade, it is that, with the Rio conference again marking this milestone of bringing together the policymakers and scientists in those conversations.
Are there any more questions?
Thank you. Thank you. Just one question. I know the process has actually a lot of mechanisms to get feedback from diverse stakeholders. How is that working? What lessons have you learned? Because I think a lot of us, we are trying to do that, like get on the table and have a conversation with input before having the actual conversation. So I know that's hard, but I know you have tried different ways to do that. And if you can tell us what's working and what's not working to bring those inputs.
Yeah, I think it's another very interesting question. And I think I'll be very frank, I think we've been good at when we see proposals and ideas coming to us to look at them and evaluate and provide advice on how we can strengthen some of the co-design, the co-delivery, the collaboration, identifying those science to policy impact pathways, as our board likes to call them. What we've been less good on is following up and providing the support to those groups to actually do what they said they were going to do. I think we all know how hard it is. You have great proposals coming through, you're writing great proposals, but then where's the support to actually implement some of that? Now, I will cite just 2 examples again, and these are things that we are testing, that we are trialing, and hopefully are able to scale up if resources work. The first is around a different approach to capacity development, I would say, which is about taking groups of people who have good ideas and supporting and mentoring them through a co-design process. This is something that we did with a group here in the Caribbean, and we've just finished with 12 different projects in Africa, where people came to us with sort of, I've got something that I think meets the aims of the Decade Action, but I don't know who to involve. I don't know where to find funding. I don't know how to pull it all together. And so these groups are supported and mentored through a 12-module training program. The Africa one actually went over a period of about 6 months to give time for feedback. This has proved successful in some respects, in that we have some very strong project ideas that can be submitted for funding, but it is very labor intensive, and that's 12 projects in Africa. I think it was 6 in the Caribbean, and all of that takes a lot of resources, but it is a model that does have merit and could potentially be scaled up. The second thing we've been trying to do is actually partner with funding organizations. This includes the Belmont Forum, which is based at IAI in Panama, which has a strong focus on transdisciplinary research, but supporting scientists in transdisciplinary research. And so, for example, there have just been a round of projects funded in Africa. These all had African PIs and involve at least 2, if not 3 African countries. This is within the framework of the Ocean Decade. And through the process, those teams are funded to participate in training and capacity building around co-design, around co-delivery, around, again, these ideas of support and mentoring throughout the process, and forming a cohort that can exchange experience and learn from each other. We're opening up a call soon globally, also with the Belmont Forum, and we've done similar things with the German government, really looking for those partners that do have that very hands-on approach to ensuring that that research groups, particularly in areas where there are fewer skills or there's less human capacity, just in terms of the number of people in a team, are able to have that ongoing support and mentoring. But again, very, very labor intensive. It's not a global solution, but it does help us support certain groups through the process.
Thank you, Allison. Sep Hakabo with Environmental Defense Fund. I recently heard the phrase that hope is not just a noun, but hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. And you very much seem like someone to roll up your sleeves. You also have a perspective that a lot of us don't necessarily see, from challenges, but also those hope spots. So maybe for all of us, it'd be great to hear, like, what gives you hope right now?
Yeah, I think it's a really, I mean, we all know it's very easy to lose that, right? But there are a couple of things. And that first slide I showed of where we were collectively as an ocean community in 2015, I think it's really easy to forget how far we've come since then. I mean, we've got the ocean climate, and again, you know, I know this is coming from a sort of a UN perspective and so on, but these policies and frameworks are important and do sort of set the discussion at the national level because they're member states and governments who are supporting these. So we've got the Ocean Climate Dialogue on the UNFCCC. Ocean is formally recognised, which it wasn't 10 years ago in the climate change dialogue. Sure, it's not enough, but it's something. We have the BBNJ agreement, and there is so much excitement and so much enthusiasm around this, particularly given how quickly it was ratified. Nobody expected that. And I would, speaking again, quite frankly, even within the secretariats of the different UN agencies, we were blown away at how quickly governments came to the table with the ratification for that. The CBD targets have the Convention on Biological Diversity, much stronger recognition of marine and ocean issues than the Aichi targets. Again, it's not perfect, but it is a massive step forward. So if you think about 3 big global policy frameworks around BBNJ, around climate, around biodiversity, we've made massive, massive strides. So that's one thing. And I accept that's a fairly UN-centric perspective, but I do argue again that it is important because these are member states supporting these decisions. The second one, and this is not meant to be at all tokenistic because it's something I truly, truly believe, is the early career ocean professionals and the younger generation. In conferences, in meetings 10 years ago, you did not see the engagement, the strength of voices, the boldness with which this generation is speaking out. I have seen some incredible presentations, scientific work of early career ocean professionals who fully have their place at the table and who are thinking in these terms of sustainability science, thinking in terms of transdisciplinarity, who want careers that span across the natural and social sciences, who want to be ocean professionals sitting within industry and bringing their expertise there. I honestly think that that is a paradigm shift over the last 10 years. And we have early career ocean professionals on all our boards, all our working groups. We work with this, with this community day in and day out. And that, I think, at the end of the day, is what gives me hope that all these great, nice policy frameworks are actually going to get implemented because you have such a passionate, intelligent, and articulate body of people as ocean champions coming through. And I think, kudos and congratulations to all of that generation. I know we will hear from several of them during this week because it's a huge change from where we were 5 or 10 years ago.
I think it looks as if there are no more questions. So with that, I would like to thank Allison for a very, wrong place, maybe not. I'd like to thank Allison for a very rich, thought-provoking keynote presentation for today. And Allison will be here during the week. So I do encourage you, your questions aren't limited to this 15 minutes. Please feel free to engage and continue your discussions. We have one more, so thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
We have one more item to So one of the traditions that we have had at GCFI that Alejandro spoke about earlier was the ringing of the bell, which was an honor that was bestowed upon the executive secretary, which was previously Leroy Croswell. So on behalf of the board of directors of the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute, it is my honor to formally announce that this 78th annual institute is now open. Thank you, Allison.
Thank you.
We have one more item to So one of the traditions that we have had at GCFI that Alejandro spoke about earlier was the ringing of the bell, which was an honor that was bestowed upon the executive secretary, which was previously Leroy Croswell. So on behalf of the board of directors of the Gulf and Caribbean Fisheries Institute, it is my honor to formally announce that this 78th Annual Institute is now open.